Hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Anderson. Today is July the 7th, 2020. The title of this talk today is Time to Bury the Flag, the long-awaited and desperately needed death of the Confederacy. I want to tell you a couple of stories, and then I want to show you what's in this box I've got behind me. I've kept something in this box for over 30 years. It's time for me to take it out of the box, talk about it, and do what's necessary with it. So this morning I was taking a walk. I always listen to somebody important, meaningful, wise as I'm taking my walk. And this morning I listened to a speech by Frederick Douglass, which was delivered in New York State in 1852 on July the 5th. He was a black man who had escaped slavery in Maryland, gone to the North, and become one of the greatest speakers of his time. And he spoke about the horrors of slavery and how abolition, getting rid of slavery, was so important. This was 1852. I was so struck by this, and I recommend you go online and listen to Ossie Davis read the entire speech. It's really meaningful, really powerful. And my opinion is every frickin' white person out there should listen to this, because the amount of brainwashing that we have been submitted to, especially if you grew up in the South as I did, is just absolutely astounding to me. I like to think of myself as a smart person, an educated person, an open-minded person. And even as late as the 1980s, I was still enamored with what's in that box. But let me tell you a couple of stories before I get to it. 1959, I was 14 years old, 8th grade. I had to take a semester's course in junior high. It was required in every 8th grade in the entire state of white people, South Carolina, of white people. I don't know if it was taught in the black communities in schools. I don't know to this day, but I know it was taught in my school, in my junior high. That's what we called it then, call it middle school now. And it was required, and it was entitled The History of the War Between the States. Now, right there, unless you pay attention, you don't know that the brainwashing begins. Because they call it the war between the states, meaning the people who wrote this course saw the Confederacy as a legitimate state called the Confederate States of America, CSA. They did not call themselves traitors or treasonous people who had rebelled against the United States of America. Even in 1959, I was taught that. Now, we were given, I think it was 8, it might have been 10 reasons then for the causes of the war between the states. Only one of them, like 4, 5, or 6, was stated as slavery. And it was played down. It was civil rights, states' rights, it was economy, it was all kinds of things. But when the states, the 13 states in the South, went to war against the country we call the United States of America, they all put the number one reason as slavery. Now, in the South, in 1861, there were approximately 9 million people total. That included black people. They, of course, were not called black people then. They were called colored or Negroes. Only 5 million of those people were white. 4 million slaves were in those 13 states. And 25% of the white people, that's over 1 million of them, owned slaves. And slaves were at the core of the economy because they were free labor. Now, if you have any doubt in your mind about the horror of slavery, you need simply just do a little bit of reading about it. It means total loss of respect, of control, of your future, of your family, and even of your life. Before the war, before 1861, for example, the state of Virginia had 72 laws that, if were broken by a black man, would result in death. 72. And out of those 72, only 2, if committed by a white man, would result in death. 72 for the black man, 2 for the white, resulting in death. Total absurdity. But that's what we were taught. I wasn't taught that in 1959. So I grew up in a place where the South and the Confederacy, even though they lost the war, was not dead. The flag still flew everywhere, and I was enamored of it. I thought it was a wonderful thing. I thought it was really cool. Everybody I knew thought it was that way. I didn't know any white person who thought the Confederate battle flag was a terrible thing. Now, you know, if you have watched any of the movies that have been out about Americans at war in the last 50 years, you know that the flag has enormous significance, enormous power. The flag still flies, has meaning to all of us, even as we sing it in the song every year. So a flag symbolizes something truly, truly meaningful. And I was raised in an environment where the Confederate flag was equal in importance to the American flag. Equal. And no one said to me, ever, even in school, hey, number one, we lost. Number two, our cause was not just. Our cause was slavery. We went to war and killed over 750,000 Americans so that we could keep our slaves. Now, that's not Southern pride. There is no pride in slavery. There's only shame. Only shame. Imagine this. Imagine that you went to Germany today and they were still flying Nazi flags. What would you think? What if they allowed people to sing songs about how great Hitler was and put up statues of Hitler and fly Nazi flags? Americans died to protect us against that insanity. The Germans were responsible for the murder, the slaughter of over 6 million Jews. They don't allow that flag to fly anymore in that country. It is a flag of shame. But something that happened over 150 years ago, the South lost the war. They were allowed somehow to hold on to that sense, that craziness, that they would rise again, that the flag could still fly. And yet, we didn't get the point. And now we are fighting like crazy over this thing called, let's get rid of the Confederate flag. Let's put it in a museum where it belongs and talk about what it really signifies was something really shameful that we in the South were responsible for. Now, in the late 1980s, I had an uncle who was very high up in South Carolina government. He knew the governor, and I knew that he knew the governor. And I was living way out away from South Carolina in Hawaii then, and I sent him a letter. And I said, listen, I know that the state of South Carolina is still flying the rebel flag on the pole over the State House, still to this day. And I know that you give that flag away every once in a while. I want one of them. Even as late as the late 1980s, I still had the idea that that flag was pretty cool. And my uncle wrote me back and said, I could never ask the governor for that, blah, blah, blah. I wrote him another letter, and I said, I'm going to call the governor because I know his name. I got his phone number. I'm going to call him and tell him my uncle, who he knew personally, wouldn't send me one of those flags. It only took me about a week and a half. I got one. I got one. I got one of the Confederate flags that was flying over the State House of South Carolina, and I am ashamed to say that still in the 1980s, as enlightened as I thought I was, that I didn't get the point about the flag. I didn't get the point that it was a flag of shame. I thought it was cool. And yet, when I did get the flag, I never really took it out of the box. Something inside me said, don't fly that thing. Don't put it up on the wall. Don't put it outside. Don't show it to your friends. Just hold on to it. I couldn't expose it. I couldn't fly it. I think the reason I couldn't was because some part of me knew it was wrong. Some part of me knew it was shameful. Some part of me knew it was a flag that said, we destroyed the lives of black people for 400 years. And then we fought a war to retain our right to continue to do that after a little over 300 years. And we killed 750,000 Americans. Now, listen, there were only about 30 million Americans total in 1861. We have 330-something million Americans now. Maybe it's a little higher than that. 1861, we had 1/10 of that. And we killed 750,000. And that's just the people who died. How about all the families that we destroyed because of that war? And yet we still want to fly the flag. And I was one of those people. A part of my mind was still brainwashed. It scares me now to think about it. And I wonder if there's other parts that need to be cleaned up in there that are still wrong about things that are obvious maybe to other people. And I want to show you what's in the box and then talk a bit briefly about what I want to do with it. This is what I got from my uncle. It's the battle flag, the Confederate battle flag that was flown over the State House in South Carolina. 13 stars on this flag. 13. Each one represented a state that betrayed their Constitution, the Constitution of the United States of America, in the service of the most shameful, horrible sin ever committed, in my opinion, by this nation. Slavery is absolutely the worst thing you can do to a human being. And this flag was flown as a symbol of that rebellion. Now, as I said, I never really took it out of the box. I kept it in the closet. I kept it in a cabinet. It's never really seen the outdoor light of day since it arrived in my house about 33 years ago. But now it's out, and I know that it needs to be buried. It needs to be buried symbolically. We need to recognize that we can't fly a flag that says, I believe we should have the right to enslave other people. We can't fly a flag that says we had the right to kill 750,000 Americans. We cannot stand on the 4th of July and celebrate our independence, our rights, our equality, our statement about how prideful we are in what America stands for, and fly this flag. We can't do that. And now maybe it's time as a nation that we look out among ourselves and we see we have white people, we have black people, we have brown people, we have people of all kinds of shades of colors. And America means we are together. America means we come together to rise up to something better than that. Something where people feel safe and respected, all people. And we cannot live together with racism. We cannot live together treating people differently simply because their skin color is different. The Confederacy died in 1865. But it's taken until 2020 for us to begin to understand the flag must be buried. The war's over. The South lost. Thank you, God. And we must move forward with an embrace of our differences, not with hatred, not with racism, not with division, but coming together in the true sense of what America is really about. God bless us. God bless America.